What happens when a single meal denied in first class sparks a revolution? Meet Amara Jackson, a black female CEO whose quiet strength turned a soggy sandwich into a global call for respect. In the polished world of Horizon Airlines, she faced a subtle sting of discrimination, but instead of shouting, she struck with precision, exposing a system that dared to dismiss her worth. This is a story of courage, strategy, and the power to change an industry not with noise, but with undeniable truth. Will you stand with Amara? Like this video to honor her fight, comment with your own story of defiance, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that ignite change. Don't miss a second, her journey will leave you inspired to claim your own seat at the table. In the sleek first-class cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight 522, Amara Jackson was about to discover that even at the top, respect isn't guaranteed. The 38-year-old black female CEO of Nexus Innovations stepped aboard, her presence commanding yet graceful, like a symphony played in a room accustomed to silence. Her charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, hugged her frame, and her leather briefcase gleamed under the cabin's ambient lights. Amara wasn't just another passenger. She was a trailblazer, a Forbes 30 Under 40 alumna whose cybersecurity firm had redefined data protection. Today, she was bound for San Francisco from Atlanta, Georgia, to seal a $2 billion deal with a Silicon Valley Titania deal that would cement her legacy as a black woman leading in a world rarely designed for her. Yet, as she settled into seat 1A, the best seat in the house, she felt the weight of subtle glances, the kind she'd learned to recognize long ago. They weren't hostile, but they questioned her place in this gilded space. The cabin hummed with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of tailored suits, but Amara's calm exterior hid a storm waiting to break. This flight, she sensed, would be more than a journey across the country. It would be a reckoning. Her polished heels clicked softly as she stowed her briefcase, each movement deliberate, a quiet assertion of her right to be here. The first-class cabin was a world of privileged leather seats stitched with precision, crystal glasses catching the light, and service meant to make you feel untouchable. For Amara, though, this wasn't a gift handed to her. Every rung of her climb had been fought for, from late nights coding in her dorm to boardrooms where she was mistaken for the help. She'd earned this seat, not just with success, but with resilience. As she adjusted her cufflinks, a flight attendant passed by, offering a perfunctory nod before lavishing attention on a white male passenger behind her. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. She knew this script, the invisible line between belonging and being tolerated. But Amara Jackson wasn't here to play a supporting role. Seat 1A was hers, and it was about to become the stage for a story that would shake an industry to its core. Just as Amara Jackson settled into the plush leather of Seat 1A, expecting the seamless luxury promised by Horizon Airlines, a subtle crack in the facade of first-class privilege revealed itself. The cabin's soft lighting and the clink of crystal glasses painted a picture of exclusivity. But for Amara, a 38-year-old black female CEO, this was more than a flight, it was a stage where her worth would be tested. She had pre-ordered her meal a week ago, a ritual of grilled salmon with truffle risotto and a glass of Napa Valley Cabernet, not out of extravagance but as a quiet claim to her place among the elite. Each bite was a reminder of the battles she'd won to sit here, from coding in cramped dorm rooms to silencing boardroom skeptics. But when the flight attendant, Sarah Mitchell, approached, her blonde hair neatly pinned and her smile as thin as the plastic tray she carried, Amara's world tilted. "We're out of premium meals, ma'am," Sarah said, her voice flat, placing a soggy turkey sandwich and a half-filled cup of water before Amara. The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. Amara's eyes flicked to the passengers behind her white men in crisp suits, their tables adorned with caviar, seared scallops, and wine poured with deference. Sarah called them by name, her tone warm, her posture attentive. "Mr. Harrison, more champagne?" "Mr. Caldwell, your steak's coming right up." Yet for Amara, the only black woman in the cabin, there was no apology, no explanation, just a dismissive shrug and a glance that seemed to say, "This is all you get." The air grew heavy, the hum of the cabin fading as Amara's pulse quickened. This wasn't a menu error. It was a message. One she'd felt before in boardrooms and conference halls, where her presence was questioned. Sarah's cold efficiency, the way she lingered with others but barely met Amara's gaze, spoke of a system that saw her as an outsider, unworthy of the luxury she'd earned. Amara's fingers tightened around her tablet, her calm exterior masking a rising storm. She wouldn't raise her voice or demand attention. That wasn't her way. But as Sarah walked away, her heels clicking with indifference, Amara knew this moment was the spark of something bigger, a challenge she would meet, not with anger, but with the precision of a woman who had toppled empires before. But the sting of Sarah Mitchell's indifference didn't fade as she walked away, leaving Amara Jackson staring at the soggy turkey sandwich in Seat 1A, a silent insult in the polished world of Horizon Airlines' first-class cabin. The hum of conversation and the clink of champagne glasses behind her felt like a distant echo, drowned out by the pulse thundering in Amara's ears. At 38, the black female CEO of Nexus Innovations was no stranger to being underestimated. But this moment cut deeper, slicing through the armor she'd built over years of navigating spaces not designed for her. The sandwich wasn't just a meal, it was a symbol of a system that dared to diminish her, to remind her that no matter her Forbes accolades or billion-dollar deals, some would always see her as less. Amara's fingers hovered over the plastic tray, her manicured nails catching the cabin's soft light. She didn't touch the food. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle. Memories flooded back sharp, vivid, like shards of glass. At 25, she'd stood in a Palo Alto boardroom, her AI prototype ready to revolutionize cybersecurity, only for a venture capitalist to ask if she was there to take notes. At 32, a tech conference moderator questioned if her success was a diversity quota win. Each slight had been a spark, fueling her rise, but also a reminder of the invisible barriers she faced. Now, in the luxury of first class, the same script played out, disguised in Sarah's cold shrug and the laughter of the white passengers savoring their caviar. Amara's heart churned with a familiar cocktail of anger and fatigue, the kind that came from fighting to be seen. But she wouldn't let it consume her. She exhaled slowly, her breath steadying, her mind sharpening like a blade. This wasn't the time for outbursts or accusations. That was what they expected, a reaction they could dismiss as oversensitive. Amara was different. She was a strategist, a woman who'd turned skepticism into contracts and doubt into empires. Her eyes opened, locking onto the tablet beside her. A storm was rising within her, not loud or chaotic, but precise, controlled, and unstoppable. She tapped her fingers rhythmically on the armrest, each beat a countdown to action. Sarah's dismissive glance, the way she lingered with the men behind her, calling them Mr. Harrison and Mr. Caldwell, with warm thievery detail, was seared into Amara's mind. This wasn't just personal. It was systemic, a culture that allowed subtle discrimination to thrive under the guise of service. Amara's resolve hardened. She wouldn't confront Sarah now, not in the cabin where her voice could be drowned out. Instead, she'd let the system face its own truth. Her fingers brushed the tablet's screen, a quiet promise that this flight would mark the beginning of something far bigger than a denied meal. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling cruising altitude, but for Amara, the ascent was just beginning. No one in the first-class cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight 522 could have guessed that Amara Jackson, seated calmly in 1A, was quietly assembling a case that would shake an industry. The dimmed cabin lights and the clink of wine glasses behind her masked the storm brewing within the 38-year-old black female CEO of Nexus Innovations. The soggy turkey sandwich, a stark insult against the caviar and champagne, served to others, still sat untouched on her tray. Sarah Mitchell's dismissive shrug and the warm deference she showed to the white passengers, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Caldwell, had ignited a fire in Amara, not of rage, but of calculated resolve. This wasn't just about a meal, it was about a system that dared to diminish her, and she was done letting it slide. Her fingers, steady and deliberate, brushed the screen of her tablet, launching Nexus Innovations' proprietary security app, a tool she'd built to protect data and, now, to expose truth. With a few taps, she accessed Horizon Airlines' crew database, her eyes narrowing as Sarah Mitchell's profile loaded. Senior cabin crew, Idaho HA 4721, 2 complaints in the past year for selective service, both dismissed with insufficient evidence. Amara's lips pressed into a thin line. The pattern was clear, and it wasn't an accident. Sarah's behavior wasn't a one-off. It was a symptom of a culture that allowed subtle discrimination to fester, unchecked. Amara's pulse quickened, but her face remained a mask of calm, her years of navigating hostile boardrooms teaching her to channel emotion into action. She scrolled further, uncovering an internal memo from Sarah's supervisor. Prioritize high-value passengers for tips. The language was vague, but the implication was sharp passengers like Amara, a black woman, weren't deemed high value. The cabin's soft hum faded as Amara's focus sharpened, each piece of data a brick in the wall she was building. She opened an encrypted messaging app and typed to her executive assistant Jordan Hayes in Atlanta. Activate audit protocol. Flight 522, crew IDHA 4721, urgent. Cross-reference passenger complaints, service logs, and cabin footage. The message was short, but its weight was seismic. Jordan, trained to handle crises with the precision of a cybersecurity expert, would know exactly what to do. Amara leaned back, her eyes flicking to Sarah, who was pouring wine for Mr. Harrison with a bright smile, oblivious to the net closing around her. The tension in Amara's chest eased slightly, a moment of rest before the next surge. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who'd been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel they didn't belong in spaces they'd earned. Her tablet pinged softly an update from Jordan. Data retrieval in progress. Complaints found, 3 minority passengers, same crew, last 18 months. Amara's resolve hardened. This was no longer a personal slight. It was a systemic failure, and she was about to force Horizon Airlines to face it. The cabin lights flickered as the plane hit a patch of turbulence, but Amara remained steady, her mind racing ahead to the landing in San Francisco, where her actions would spark a reckoning. If Sarah thought a sandwich could define Amara's worth, she was about to learn how wrong she was. This story is just beginning, and we need your support to keep sharing powerful tales like Blackstories that inspire, challenge, and change the world. Hit that like button if Amara's strength moves you, drop a comment with your thoughts or your own story of standing up, and subscribe to our channel to fuel more meaningful content. Your engagement is the spark that keeps these stories alive, so join us in amplifying voices that demand to be heard. As the wheels of Horizon Airlines Flight 522 screeched against the San Francisco tarmac, Amara Jackson's quiet resolve in Seat 1A was about to ignite a fire that would engulf an entire system. The first-class cabin, with its polished wood and clinking glasses, had been a stage for subtle discrimination, but now the curtains were parting on a reckoning none could have foreseen. Amara, the 38-year-old black female CEO of Nexus Innovations, had spent the flight gathering evidence, her tablet humming with data that exposed Sarah Mitchell's dismissive service as part of a deeper pattern. The soggy turkey sandwich, a stark contrast to the caviar served to white passengers, wasn't just an insult, it was a spark that Amara had fanned into a blaze. Her encrypted message to her assistant, Jordan Hayes, had set a chain reaction in motion. And as the plane taxied to the gate, the consequences were waiting to unfold. Amara unbuckled her seatbelt with deliberate calm, her charcoal suit pristine, her expression unreadable. The cabin stirred with the usual post-flight chatter passengers like Mr. Harrison and Mr. Caldwell, who'd been pampered with wine and warm towels, rummaged for their briefcases, oblivious to the storm about to break. Amara's tablet pinged softly, a final update from Jordan. Report sent to Horizon's CEO. Cabin footage secured. HR and legal team dispatched to SFO. Her lips curved into a faint, steely smile. This wasn't about personal vindication. It was about forcing a system to confront its flaws. She stood, adjusting her cufflinks, her heels clicking softly as she prepared to step off the plane. The air felt charged, the weight of her actions palpable. Sarah Mitchell, still circulating with her practiced smile, had no idea that her indifference had been documented, dissected, and delivered to those with the power to act. Amara's heart beat steadily, a rhythm of purpose honed by years of navigating spaces that questioned her worth. She recalled the boardroom at 25, where a venture capitalist mistook her for an intern, and the tech conference at 32, where her success was chalked up to diversity quotas. Each slight had taught her that change didn't come from shouting it, came from precision, evidence, and unrelenting focus. Now, in the luxury of first class, she was applying that lesson with devastating effect. As the plane door opened, Amara stepped into the jetway, her leather briefcase swinging lightly at her side. Waiting at the gate were two figures in dark suits. Horizon's regional director, Michael Torres, and a legal officer, Karen Lynn, their faces taut with urgency. "Miss Jackson, we're deeply sorry for any inconvenience," Torres began, his voice clipped. Amara's gaze cut through him like a blade. "This isn't about apologies," she said, her tone low but piercing. "It's about accountability. You'll see." She walked past, her stride unhurried, leaving the two executives exchanging glances that betrayed their unease. They'd read Jordan's report complete with cabin footage showing Sarah's selective service logs highlighting disparities, and passenger complaints spanning 18 months. This wasn't a minor service hiccup. It was a cultural failure, and Amara had laid it bare. Behind her, the cabin crew exited through a separate door, their usual post-flight banter silenced by an unexpected sight. Three HR officials in Horizon uniforms, flanked by a lawyer clutching a tablet stamped with Ethics Review. Sarah's smile faltered as the lead HR officer, a woman with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "Flight 522 crew, report to Emergency Review Room 3. This is mandatory." Sarah's eyes darted to her colleague, a younger attendant named Tom, who looked equally stunned. The marble floor of the terminal gleamed under harsh lights, transforming the hallway into a courtroom. Sarah's heels clicked hesitantly as she followed, her composure cracking like thin ice. She dismissed Amara as just another passenger, perhaps too sensitive about a sandwich, but now the weight of her actions was crashing down. Amara, meanwhile, moved through the terminal with the poise of someone who'd already won. Her phone vibrated a message from Jordan. "Sarah Mitchell suspended pending investigation. Full crew under review. CEO has called an emergency board meeting." Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to. The dominoes were falling, each one a testament to her strategy. She'd chosen not to confront Sarah in the cabin, knowing a public scene could be dismissed as emotional. Instead, she'd let data and systems speak. Her evidence airtight, her actions irreversible. The terminal buzzed with travelers, but for Amara, the world narrowed to the path ahead, a path she'd paved with every calculated step. The men behind her in first class, who'd laughed over champagne while she was served water, would soon read headlines about this flight. Sarah, who'd shrugged off Amara's pre-ordered meal, would face questions she couldn't answer. And Horizon Airlines, proud of its elite service, would be forced to reckon with a truth Amara had exposed. Luxury wasn't just about leather seats and fine wine. It was about respect, and she'd been denied it. As she stepped into the waiting black SUV outside the airport, Amara glanced back at the terminal, the glass doors reflecting the fading light. This was the high point. The moment her quiet power had shifted the ground beneath an industry. But the fight wasn't over. The next hours would see her story ripple outward, challenging not just Horizon, but every space where privilege hid behind a smile. For now, she leaned back in the SUV, the city skyline looming ahead, ready to carry her victory into the future. Before the wheels of Flight 522 had even cooled on the San Francisco tarmac, Amara Jackson's calculated strike against Horizon Airlines' discriminatory culture was already sending shockwaves far beyond the terminal. The 38-year-old black female CEO of Nexus Innovations had stepped off the plane in seat 1A, leaving behind a meticulously crafted report that exposed flight attendant Sarah Mitchell's selective service and the systemic bias it represented. The soggy turkey sandwich, a stark contrast to the caviar lavished on white passengers, had become more than a personal slight. It was now a symbol of a flawed system, and Amara's actions were about to rewrite its rules. As she settled into the leather seat of a waiting SUV, her phone buzzed with notifications, not from colleagues or clients, but from a world waking up to her story. Within hours, the Washington Post published a searing headline: "Black CEO denied first-class meal, exposes airline bias." TechCrunch followed, calling Amara a catalyst for systemic change in luxury service. The hashtag number first class for all began trending on social media, a digital rallying cry that turned Amara's experience into a global conversation. Posts flooded in stories of minority passengers ignored on flights, women dismissed in boardrooms, and workers sidelined in elite spaces. Each shared a common thread: the quiet humiliation of being deemed unworthy and the resolve to demand better. Amara's heart swelled as she scrolled through the posts, her calm exterior hiding a surge of emotion. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a movement, and she was its spark. Back at Horizon's headquarters, the boardroom was a pressure cooker. CEO Elizabeth Warner, known for her progressive stance, sat at the head of a table littered with printouts of Amara's report cabin footage, service logs, and a damning history of complaints against Sarah Mitchell and her crew. The evidence was airtight. Sarah's warm deference to white passengers like Mr. Harrison and Mr. Caldwell, her dismissive shrug to Amara, and 3 prior complaints from minority passengers, all buried under insufficient evidence. Warner's voice was steady but resolute. This isn't a one-off. It's a cultural failure, and it stops now. Within 24 hours, Horizon announced sweeping reforms. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all 15,000 employees, a direct feedback channel for passengers with a 48-hour response guarantee, and a new Equity and Excellence program to redefine first-class service. In an unprecedented move, they invited Amara to serve as a strategic advisor, recognizing her not just as a victim, but as a visionary who could reshape their future. The announcement sent ripples through the industry delta, and United issued statements pledging to review their own service protocols, and hotel chains like Marriott began auditing their VIP programs. Amara's victory was no longer confined to Horizon. It was reshaping the very definition of luxury. The emotional weight of the moment hit Amara as she sat in her San Francisco hotel room, the city's skyline glittering beyond her window. She'd spent years proving her worth in tech, a field where Black women were often invisible. At 25, she'd coded through nights to build her first AI prototype, only to be asked if she was the diversity hire. At 32, she'd faced smirks when presenting to investors who doubted her expertise. Each battle had forged her into a strategist, but also left scars, moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if the fight was worth it. Now, reading a number first-class for all post from a Black single mother who'd been ignored on her first-class flight, Amara felt a quiet triumph. Her actions had given voice to those who'd been silenced, and that was worth every sleepless night. The tension eased for a moment, a pause in the storm, as she sipped chamomile tea, the warmth grounding her. But the movement was far from over. By morning, Forbes ran a cover story: Amara Jackson, from Seat 1A to Industry Reform. The article detailed how her report had forced Horizon to confront not just Sarah's actions, but a culture that had enabled them. Social media amplified the narrative, with influencers, activists, and everyday travelers sharing the hashtag alongside their own stories. A viral video emerged of passengers' shaky footage of Sarah's dismissive tone to Amara, captioned, "This is why we fight." It racked up 10 million views in 48 hours, each share a testament to the power of Amara's quiet resolve. Horizon's stock dipped briefly, but their swift response to suspending Sarah and 2 other crew members, plus committing $5 million to diversity initiatives, earned cautious praise from analysts. Amara, however, remained silent. She declined interviews with CNN and Good Morning America, letting the evidence speak for itself. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Jordan. "Board meeting tomorrow. They're calling it a cultural reset. You did this." Amara's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the fire of purpose. She hadn't just challenged a flight attendant. She'd forced an industry to look in the mirror. The cabin of Flight 522, with its leather seats and crystal glasses, had been a microcosm of a world that often excluded people like her. Now, that world was cracking open, making room for those who'd been pushed aside. As she gazed at the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance, Amara knew this was her highest triumph yet, not because she'd won, but because she'd made it impossible for the system to look away. The movement she'd ignited was a beacon, lighting the way for others to claim their rightful place, whether in Seat 1A or beyond. While the number first class for all movement blazed across headlines and social media, Amara Jackson chose to step back from the spotlight, her quiet strength reshaping the world from the shadows. The 38-year-old Black female CEO of Nexus Innovations had ignited a firestorm with her calculated response to Horizon Airlines' discriminatory service on Flight 522, transforming a soggy turkey sandwich into a symbol of systemic change. The viral hashtag, fueled by her evidence of flight attendant Sarah Mitchell's bias, had spurred Horizon to suspend crew members, launch mandatory bias training, and invite Amara to advise their Equity and Excellence program. Headlines from Forbes to The Washington Post hailed her as a trailblazer, and the industry from airlines to luxury hotels was scrambling to audit their own practices. Yet, as the world clamored for her voice, Amara returned to Atlanta, her mission not to bask in glory but to ensure the change she'd sparked would endure. In her sleek office on the 40th floor of Nexus Innovations headquarters, the city skyline stretching beyond her window, Amara sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop casting soft light on her face. The frenzy of media requests, CNN, Good Morning America, even a New York Times op-ed offer piled up in her inbox, but she declined them all. Fame wasn't her goal. Impact was. Her heart stirred with a mix of pride and resolve as she read a number first-class for all post from a young Black entrepreneur who'd been overlooked on a business-class flight. Because of Amara Jackson, I know my seat matters, it read. That was her victory, not headlines, but the courage she'd awakened in others. Amara's fingers paused over her keyboard, a memory surfacing like a wave. At 25, she'd pitched her first AI prototype to a room of white investors who asked if she was there to diversify the team. At 32, a tech conference host questioned if her success was luck. Each slide had been a brick in the wall of doubt she'd dismantled, but they'd also left scars, moments of exhaustion, of wondering if she'd ever be seen for her brilliance. Now, those scars fueled her. For every Black woman told her place was limited. The emotional weight settled, a quiet pause, as she sipped coffee, the Atlanta sunrise painting the room gold. Then, her phone pinged a letter from a 17-year-old girl in Chicago, inspired by the Forbes cover story. My counselor said tech isn't for girls like me, the girl wrote. But you changed that. How do I be like you? Amara set her mug down, her eyes glistening. This was why she'd acted. Why she'd chosen evidence over outrage on Flight 522. She opened a crisp sheet of stationery, rare in her digital world, and began to write by hand, her pen gliding with the precision of her code. Dear Maya, she wrote, they'll tell you your dreams are too big, your seat too high, don't shout back. Show up, work harder than they expect, and never let them forget you belong. You're not just a girl from Chicago, you're a force, and seat 1A is yours if you claim it. She signed it with a postscript. P.S. When they doubt you, let your actions speak. The letter was small, personal, but its weight was immense beacon for a girl who might one day sit where Amara sat now. The moment swelled, a new high, as Amara sealed the envelope, her resolve deepening. She wasn't done. Horizon's reforms were a start, but true change meant ensuring no one else faced the indifference she'd endured. Days later, she boarded another Horizon flight, this time to New York for a tech summit. She hadn't requested special treatment, hadn't mentioned her name to the ground staff. Yet, as she settled into seat 1A, she noticed something new, a small brass plaque affixed to the tray table. Reserved for change. At the bottom, in fine print. In honor of Amara Jackson. Her caught a rare crack in her composure. The plaque wasn't just a gesture. It was a promise that Horizon, and perhaps the industry, would remember her stand. She fastened her seatbelt, the plane's engines humming, and gazed out at the tarmac. The sky was vast, bluer than before, because Amara had carved out space for those once deemed unworthy. Her legacy wasn't in the media frenzy or the hashtag's millions of shares. It was in the quiet moments, Maya reading her letter, a Black mother booking first class without fear, a flight attendant hesitating before dismissing a passenger. Amara's actions had rewritten the script, not with noise, but with the undeniable power of truth. As the plane climbed, the city shrinking below, she felt a final surge of triumph. She'd turned a denied meal into a movement, a cold glance into a mirror for an industry. Her story was a reminder. Change doesn't need a spotlight, it needs a spark, struck at the right moment. Amara leaned back, the plaque glinting in the sunlight, and knew her quiet legacy would echo louder than any headline. As Amara Jackson's quiet legacy took root, reshaping Horizon Airlines and inspiring a global movement, the true power of her actions in Seat 1A began to crystallize into a timeless lesson. The 38-year-old Black female CEO of Nexus Innovations had turned a denied meal a soggy turkey sandwich in place of her pre-ordered salmon and risotto into a catalyst for systemic change. Her calculated response, fueled by evidence and resolve rather than outrage, had forced Horizon to suspend flight attendant Sarah Mitchell, implement mandatory bias training, and launch the Equity and Excellence program with Amara as a strategic advisor. The number First Class for All hashtag had ignited a firestorm, with millions sharing stories of being overlooked, and her handwritten letter to a Chicago teenager named Maya had planted seeds for the next generation. Yet, as Amara sat in her Atlanta office, the city's skyline glowing under a twilight haze, she knew the real victory wasn't in headlines or plaques. It was in the lesson her story etched into the world. True power lies in deliberate action, not in shouting for attention. The emotional weight of her journey settled over her, a high note that reverberated with purpose. Amara's fight hadn't begun on Flight 522. It started decades earlier, in a college dorm where she coded through nights, fueled by dreams bigger than the skepticism she faced. At 25, she'd stood before investors who mistook her for an assistant, their dismissive glances sharpening her resolve. At 32, she'd answered a conference host's insinuation that her success was diversity-driven, with a smile and a deal that silenced doubters. Each moment had been a brick in the foundation of her strength, teaching her that change required strategy, not volume. The sandwich, Sarah's cold shrug, the warm deference shown to white passengers like Mr. Harrison and Mr. Caldwell, it was all too familiar, a microcosm of a world that often saw her as less. But Amara had rewritten that script, not with a scene in the cabin, but with a report that spoke louder than any outburst. Her heart swelled as she recalled the brass plaque on her next Horizon flight, reserved for change, in honor of Amara Jackson. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a marker of a shift she'd forced, a reminder that no one could be dismissed in Seat 1A again. The moment softened, a quiet pause, as she sipped chamomile tea, the warmth grounding her. But the lesson demanded more than reflection, it demanded clarity. Amara's actions had shown that change begins with refusing to accept the unacceptable. She hadn't confronted Sarah directly, knowing a heated exchange could be brushed off as emotional. Instead, she'd used Nexus Innovations technology to uncover Sarah's history of complaints, sent an encrypted message to her assistant Jordan, and delivered a report to Horizon's CEO that left no room for excuses. The result wasn't just Sarah's suspension or Horizon's reforms. It was a ripple effect that reached beyond airlines. Hotels, restaurants, and corporate boards began examining their own cultures, spurred by the number First Class for All movement. Amara's story had become a mirror, forcing systems to see their flaws and individuals to question their silence. The emotional crescendo built as she thought of Maya, the Chicago teen who'd written to her, and countless others who now saw Seat 1A as a symbol of their right to be seen. Amara's lesson wasn't just for the elite, it was for anyone who'd been pushed aside in a boardroom, a classroom, or the back row of a plane. It was a call to act, not with anger, but with precision. Her report had taken hours to compile, but its impact would last years, proving that a single, well-timed action could topple a culture of indifference. She leaned back in her chair, the Atlanta skyline now a constellation of lights. The lesson was universal. You don't need to shout to be heard. You need to show up, gather your evidence, and strike when the moment is right. Amara's story challenged everyone to ask themselves, when have I been overlooked? When have I stayed silent? Her victory wasn't in proving her worth, she'd done that long ago, but in making it impossible for others to be ignored. The plaque on Seat 1A wasn't just for her. It was for the single mother flying first class for the first time, the young coder pitching to skeptics, the worker whose name is never remembered. Amara's final triumph was in the clarity of her message. Respect isn't a privilege reserved for the few. It's a right earned by existence. Her story closed with a vision of a world where no one needs to fight for their seat because the system has learned to see them. As the stars emerged over Atlanta, Amara knew her lesson would endure, not in the noise of applause, but in the quiet actions of those who'd heard her story and chosen to stand. The power of Seat 1A wasn't in its leather or luxury. It was in the truth it demanded, a truth Amara had unveiled with a single, unyielding act. As the Atlanta skyline faded into the twilight, Amara Jackson's story in Seat 1A became more than a moment, it became a movement, a testament to the power of quiet courage. For me, that soggy turkey sandwich wasn't just a denied meal. It was a mirror reflecting a world that too often tells people like me we don't belong. I could have shouted, demanded answers, or let anger take the wheel, but I chose a different path. I gathered evidence, leaned on the strength of my team, and let the truth speak louder than any outburst ever could. That choice didn't just change Horizon Airlines. It sparked a global conversation, from the number First Class for All hashtag to the brass plaque now honoring Seat 1A. It showed me that real change doesn't need a spotlight, it needs strategy, resilience, and an unshakable belief in your worth. This journey taught me that every slight, every dismissive glance is a chance to rewrite the rules, not just for myself, but for every person who's been made to feel invisible. The lesson is clear. You don't have to raise your voice to shift the world. You just need to act at the right moment, with the right tools, and never back down. Whether you're in a boardroom, a classroom, or the back row of a plane, your seat matters, and your voice, however quiet, can echo across generations. Amara's story is a call to each of us. When you face injustice, will you let it pass, or will you claim your place? This is the value of standing firm, not for revenge, but for a world where respect is universal, where no one is denied their due because of who they are. I'm still here, still fighting, still believing that every Seat 1A belongs to those brave enough to sit in it. Now, it's your turn. If Amara's story moved you, hit that like button to spread its power. Drop a comment below, share your own moment of standing up or a time you refuse to be unseen. And subscribe to our channel to catch more stories like this. Stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us all that change starts with a single, courageous act. Let's keep this movement alive, together, because the next Seat, 1A, could be yours.